Sri Hare Namaha. We shall begin the session now. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Paramagurubhyo Namaha. Om Adi Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Moola Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Srimad Ananda Tirtha Bhagavad Padacharya Namaha. Om Vedavyasaya Namaha. Om Bharatyay Namaha. Om Saraswatye Namaha. Om Vayave Namaha. Om Brahmane Namaha. Om Mahalakshmi Namaha. Om Narayanaya Namaha. Om Hare Namaha. Mokshaprada Shri Vasudevaya Namaha. कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय हरे परमात्मने प्रणतक्लेशनाशाय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः. हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे. नमोऽस्तु अनन्ताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षि शिरोरुबाहवे नमः. सहस्रनाम्ने पुरुषाय शाश्वते सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः. नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो ग्रन्थमुदीरयेत्. नारायणं सुरगुरुं जगदेकनाथं भक्तप्रियं सकललोकनमस्कृतं च त्रैगुण्यवर्जितम् अजं विभुमाद्यमीशं वन्दे भवग्नममरासुरसिद्धवन्द्यम्. So does anyone have any queries from the sessions conducted so far?
Hare Rama, brother.
Hare Rama.
Yeah, so I had one query that do Uttaradi Mat and Raghavendra Mat share same Guru Parampara?
Yes, somewhat.
And do they come under Ashtamat?
No, they are not the Ashtamatas. They are located elsewhere, not in Udupi. Raghavendra Mata is at Mantralaya and Uttaradi Mata has multiple branches at several places. And they are not the ones, the 8 main ones which surround the Udupi Krishna Mata.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
Any more queries?
By the way, I heard that they both don't share same Guru Parampara.
Where exactly?
From someone I heard that.
As far as I remember, they share the same Guru Parampara only because they are descended from the 3 matas, that is the 3 other major matas, that is Vyasaraja, Uttaradi and Raghavendra Mata actually have a similar Guru Parampara. But after the first few Gurus, they have a different Guru Parampara later on, all 3 of them. But again, the initial Gurus are the same for them.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
Any more queries? So one more thing I forgot to add is that both actually all 3 matas, that is Vyasaraja, Raghavendra and Uttaradi, have Padmanabha Tirtharu, Narahari Tirtharu, Madhava Tirtharu, Akshobhya Tirtharu and Jaya Tirtharu in their Guru Paramparas, and even Vidyadhiraja Tirtharu. So and later on in the parampara of Raghavendra Mata and also Sode Mata, Vagisha Tirtharu also comes there. So many gurus are actually common to the Guru Paramparas of different matas, but subsequently they later diverged when they became separate matas. So
Okay.
today we shall be discussing about the main disciples of Sri Madhvacharya, whom we have not discussed about in the previous sessions. So one more thing I want to announce is that this course is nearing its end, and we have covered almost all the content. So within next month we'll be most probably finishing this course, and we'll also be sharing the next quiz this week or next week, and then the remaining 2 quizzes will also be shared. And again, as usual, there will be 5 days time for those who want to attempt the quiz, and later on we will announce the results. And once all 4 quizzes are done, whoever wants to take any of them again can do so. So they can request us to do it.
Brother syllabus.
whatever content we've said just now, I mean, what we've discussed all this while, and most of it is covered in few of our publications and our blog articles also, and some of them we have explained here during the sessions repeatedly. So those will be the topics.
Okay, brother.
So first we shall discuss about Padmanabha Tirtharu. So Padmanabha Tirtharu was one of the first initial disciples of Sri Madhvacharya who took up sannyasa. So he was actually named Shobana Bhatta during his Purvashrama, but he later became a Vaishnava, and he formerly was actually a Smarta, but later on, after being defeated by Sri Madhvacharya in a debate, he became Sri Madhvacharya's disciple, and he was named as Sri Padmanabha Tirtha. And he is also one of the first Bhashyakaras on the Granthas of Sri Madhvacharya. So he was one of the first few people who commented upon the works of Sri Madhvacharya, and even Sri Jayatirtharu actually has praised him in a few granthas like his Brahmasutra Bhashya. So he is also one of the chief sannyasis for many matas, as we discussed already. So he comes directly after Sri Madhvacharya in the Guru Parampara of multiple Madhvas, and especially he holds importance for Sripadaraja Mata. So uh, later on, once Sripadarajaru became the pontiff of, that is the Pitadipati of the Mata at Mulabagilu, it became known as Sripadaraja Mata. So Sri Padmanabha Tirtha has written multiple commentaries on major works of Sri Madhvacharya like Mayavada Kandana, then and also Kata Lakshana, and also his Gita Bhashya, Gita Tatparya Nirnaya, and other works like Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya also. Though right now the more popular commentaries on these works are actually by Sri Jayatirtharu. So because his commentaries were more elaborate and were also in accordance with the darshan of Nyaya. Yes, any queries?
Shri Padaraja Mata comes in the Ashtamata.
No, it's not an Ashtamata. The
Okay.
Ashtamata are those 8 ones which we mentioned yesterday. And their list is available on multiple sites on the internet also.
Oh, you mentioned three only yesterday.
No, I mentioned all 8. I
All
didn't elaborately mention about the last 3. That
okay.
is Adamaru Mata, Krishnapura Mata, and Shirur Mata.
Okay, brother.
So originally, Sri Padmanabha Tirtharu, as per the Madhva Vijaya, he was actually once a very reputed Smarta Vidwan. So he was not an ordinary Smarta either, and he was actually a Vidwan, and he was considered as an expert in the Smarta Darshana. So later on, once he met Madhvacharya, he actually he had a debate later on, and he tried his best to actually defeat Sri Madhvacharya. But in the end, he actually lost the debate, and he was finally convinced after elaborate discussions with Sri Madhvacharya that the philosophy of Tattvavaada is actually the truth and is actually better than the Smarta philosophy. So after that, he learned the granthas of Sri Madhvacharya. Then finally, he became his disciple and then took up sannyasa. So later on, the next prominent disciple of Sri Madhvacharya is Sri Narahari Tirtha. So he was actually the subsequent disciple of Sri Madhvacharya, and he is actually the second disciple who became a sannyasi. So he was originally called Shyama Shastri during his Purvashrama, and he was actually from Kalinga, from the kingdom of Kalinga, which is in present day Orissa. So he is actually one such sannyasi who had actually been a ruler of Kalinga at one point. Because though being a sannyasi and not being a kshatriya, it so happened that at once after he had just taken up sannyasa, the king of Kalinga passed away, and he had a young son, and there was no one else who was fit to rule the kingdom. So the a royal elephant was actually sent, and that elephant put a garland on Sri Narahari Tirtha. So he was chosen as the temporary king, and he actually taught the Raja Vidya, and also he ended up propagating the philosophy of Tattvavaada in Orissa during this time. And for almost 12 years, till the prince grew up and was able to become the king, he ruled the kingdom, and he also uh, helped preach philosophy, and also taught philosophy to everyone there. Yes, any queries?
So he was a Kshatriya once and then he became sannyasi.
No, he was a Brahmana. That's what I said. He wasn't a Kshatriya at all, even during his Purvashrama or and after sannyasa, obviously, only Brahmanas can receive sannyasa.
So a Brahmin ruled the kingdom.
Yes, he was a temporary ruler. He was not a king as such.
Okay, brother, got it.
Yes, Narahari Tirtharu was the first person who actually worshipped Sri Sitarama, the Vigrahas of Sitarama at his mata, and that is how the Vigrahas came later through him. So this Vigraha actually was obtained from the king of Kalinga actually. So this was actually originally kept with some of the with the rulers, and it had been passed down from their generations in their dynasty. So later on, Sri Narahari Tirtharu accepted that as a gift from the new king, and he took that and started worshipping it as the main Vigraha at the Mata. So this was actually originally it was received from the dynasty of Ikshvaku. So it was actually there since the time of Sri Rama himself. So and it was also actually worshipped by even Hanuman and Bhima. And later on, finally, it came back to the third avatara of Mukhya Pranadeva, that is Madhvacharya. So Narahari Tirtharu similarly has written certain bhashyas on the granthas of Sri Madhvacharya, but not many. He has written two bhashyas on the Gita bhashya of Madhvacharya and also Yamaka Bharata. So his successor subsequently was Sri Madhava Tirtharu. And the next most prominent guru whom we did not discuss about in the previous few 2-3 sessions is Sri Brahmanya Tirtharu. So Brahmanya Tirtharu is none other than the guru of Sri Vyasa Tirtharu. So Brahmanya Tirtharu was actually a later Madhva sannyasi who appeared around 2-3 centuries later, and at that time he was living at Bannur, which is near present-day Mysuru, and it is also the reason why later on, subsequently, Vyasaraja Mata was established at a village called Sosale, which is in Mysuru. So currently, also that is the headquarters of Vyasaraja Mata, and so the main incident is that there was a childless aged couple who were the parents of Sri Vyasa Tirtharu, uh, and that Brahmana who was called Ramacharya had actually passed away when he was when he was actually trying to have snana at a river. So later on, he actually said that his atma was still in his body and he wasn't dead. And he provided some mantrakshate to his wife, and he revived the Brahmana called Ramacharya, and he blessed them that they would have two children. And the first one was Sri Vyasa Tirtharu, and he immediately was he was raised by Sri Brahmanya Tirtha himself. And since his childhood, he lived at the Mata, and he later on subsequently took sannyasa, and as we have discussed previously, he became one of the greatest panditas of the entire Madhva Sampradaya. And after Sri Madhvacharyaru and Sri Jayatirtharu, he is the most praiseworthy guru as of now. So there have been these people have been some of the most prominent disciples of Sri Madhvacharya in the past, and the other disciples of Sri Madhvacharya who have written a lot of important granthas are Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya and his son Sri Narayana Panditacharya. So Trivikrama Panditacharya is also the author of the famous Harivayu Stuti, which is a prayer when he once actually viewed Sri Madhvacharya as in three forms, as the three avatars of Pranadeva. So Trivikrama Panditacharya and his son Narayana Panditacharya were both staunch Advaiti Vidwans. They were actually Smartas, and they were also considered as some of the best Vidwans in the whole Smarta Sampradaya at that time, especially in Karnataka. And Trivikrama Panditacharya had secretly been slowly getting influenced by Sri Madhvacharya. And whenever everyone else used to be asleep in his house, it has been said that he would sometimes read the books of Sri Madhvacharya and he would think of refuting them, but still he would actually end up feeling that they are correct, and he slowly started losing faith in Advaita. Then subsequently, once he had a debate with Sri Madhvacharya, and later on he finally lost the debate, and he was also convinced that Sri Madhvacharya's philosophy is correct. So there are some accounts stating that he had a discussion with Sri Madhvacharya for 14 days or 21 days, but actually, as explained by Sri Bannanjay Govindacharya, it was actually just 7 days. So he had a discussion for 7 days with Sri Madhvacharya, and then after clarifying all the doubts he had, he finally formally became a Madhva, and he received the Vaishnava Diksha, that is Panchasamskara. So later on, and his son Sri Narayana Panditacharya also became a Madhva, and later on they wrote many works, such as Sri Narayana Panditacharya has written the Narasimha Stuti, which is one of the Panchastutis, and he has also authored the Shiva Stuti. So many of their stutis are in the Tattvavaada Vaishnava handbook, which we have published on our website. So there are 5 stutis called the Panchastutis. These stutis actually have to be recited by all Madhvas every day. So if anyone is a Madhva, along with the basic mantras given in the first chapter of our Vaishnava handbook, and also along with other rituals like applying tilaka and performing Sandhya Vandana, so one has to recite these 5 stutis as well. That is the Vishnu Stuti of Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya, which is actually unfortunately the least known. This is actually a short stuti of around some 6 to 7 shlokas, and this is one of the most important works of Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya. But today it has been ignored the most, and not many know about this. So we have published this on our website around a year back. And also another the next stuti is the Harivayu Stuti, which is considered as the most important. So this Harivayu Stuti was actually authored by Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya when he one day when Sri Madhvacharya, as usual, he would go inside the inner sanctum of the Udupi Krishna Mata, and he would close the doors for a while, and he would perform Naivedya to the deity. So on one occasion, he took quite longer than expected to finish his rituals, and Trivikrama Panditacharya, out of curiosity, opened the door and looked into the mata to see what was going on inside the inner sanctum. And to his surprise, he noticed different forms of Bhagavan and Sri Madhvacharya. So he observed Hanuman worshipping Sri Rama. Then he noticed Bhima worshipping Krishna, and he also noticed Madhvacharya worshipping Vyasa. So after seeing them in those forms, suddenly the whole Harivayu Stuti came to his mind, and he started chanting it. And that is how he composed the Harivayu Stuti. So once he composed this is when Sri Madhvacharya authored the 5th of the Dwadasha Stotras. So that is the Narasimha Nakastuti. So earlier, this Narasimha Nakastuti was thought to be a separate work of Sri Madhvacharya, but Actually, the earliest manuscript was discovered recently, where Sri Madhvacharya's Dvadasha Stotras actually has an extra stuti which has not been known to most of the earliest Madhvas also. So this was discovered by Sri Bannanjay Govindacharya recently, and it has been published by him, and it was subsequently digitized in proper in the digital Samskrita text, and was published by us on our website as well. So this is the version which we have published in our Tattvavaada handbook. So most of the other recensions of the Dvadasha Stotras have only shown the have only had 12 popular stotras, and there one stotra has been split into two, which makes the number 12. Even though in the earliest recension which has been discovered now, there is actually an extra stuti, and here the Narasimha Nakastuti was thought to be a separate grantha, but it is actually not a separate grantha. It is a part of the Dvadasha Stotras. So the reason for composing this Narasimha Nakastuti is that the Harivayu Stuti mainly praised Mukhya Pranadeva and also partially Sri Vishnu. But before beginning any such ritual, especially if it does not directly involve propitiating Bhagwan, so at that time one should always remember him. So for that reason, Sri Madhvacharya composed the Narasimha Nakastuti to be chanted at the beginning of the Vayustuti and also at the end of the Vayustuti. So whenever the Vayustuti is supposed to be chanted, this has to be done. So the next stuti is the Narasimha Stuti. So this Narasimha Stuti is actually of disputed authorship. Mostly it is believed that it was composed by Sri Narayana Panditacharya, though there are statements in some manuscripts that it was composed by Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya. So who actually composed it is not 100% certain, but it is likely a work of Sri Narayana Panditacharya, or it could be a work of Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya. And this is also one of the Panchastutis. So these stutis have to be chanted every day by all Madhvas. And the Narasimha Nakastuti is also another one of the Panchastutis. So along with that, the Shivastuti of Sri Narayana Panditacharya is another work which is one of the Panchastutis. So this Shivastuti was actually composed at Rameshwaram, the place where Rama himself had worshipped Shiva before he fought the war against Ravana on the bank of the ocean, which is at Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu. So that is the place where also the Rama Setu was constructed, uh, and also at that time when Sri Narayana Panditacharya once visited the temple, the pujaris there were actually Shaivas. So, out of hatred against him, noticing the marks of Shanka and Chakra which he had on his shoulders due to Tapta Mudra, that is the applying the heated seals of Shanka and Chakra on the shoulders. Because of that, and the Urdhva Pundra Tilaka which he was wearing, they realized he was a Vaishnava and tried their best to deny him entry into the temple, and they closed the doors of the temple and tried to fight with him, which is when he composed the Shivastuti and started chanting it. So as soon as he was done chanting it, the doors of the temple themselves opened and he had the darshan of Rameshwara. So this is the background of the Shivastuti. So the 5 Panchastutis which every Madhva to recite are the Narasimha Nakastuti, the Vishnu Stuti, Harivayu Stuti, and also the Shivastuti. And also and finally the Narasimha Stuti of Sri Narayana Panditacharya. So Sri Narayana Panditacharya has also written works like the Sangraha Ramayana, which is a summary of the Ramayana, and also Mani Manjari, which also is another work which praises Sri Rama and Sri Krishna and describes all their achievements, and also mentions some historical events later on in the last few chapters about the struggles faced by Vaishnavas and other Astikas in general due to the influence of different philosophers, and especially the Bauddhas and the Jainas. So, any queries still here?
Brother, the pujaris there in that temple are still Shiv.
Yes, they're still Shaivas only, if I remember correctly.
Okay, brother.
Any more queries?
And Vaishnavas are allowed, right?
anyone is allowed now. Now it's against the law to bar entry to anyone like that, as long as they're Hindus.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
So if there are no more queries, we'll move on now. So the next set of important gurus whom we've had are the Haridasas. So the Haridasas, as we have discussed previously, are those poets who have written bhajans praising Sri Vishnu and propagating philosophy in general. So, as we discussed, the whole tradition of the Haridasas was actually started mainly by the sannyasis themselves first. So, firstly, it was Sri Narahari Tirtha, who was one of the very first Haridasas. And then it was Sripada Rajuru, because he also wrote a lot of bhajans, especially in Kannada. And then the next one was Sri Vyasa Tirtharu, and subsequently Vyasa Tirtharu's disciples continued the tradition. So then Sri Purandaradasa and Sri Kanakadasa especially have contributed to the tradition, and also there has been partial contribution by Sri Vadiraja Tirtharu also. So after their times, for another 90 years or to almost 100 years, there were actually no more Haridasas, and after that, um, finally the next prominent Haridasa who came was Sri Vijayadasaru. So he has also composed a lot of songs in Kannada, and he also was a singer of Carnatic music, just like Sri Purandaradasa and Sri Kanakadasa. So he is also known for using certain ragas which are difficult to pronounce and sing. So that was one of his specialities. And subsequently, he later had many disciples, but not many of them are actually well known now. So he has very few disciples who became well known. And actually, later on, the next prominent member of the Haridasa tradition was Sri Jagannatha Dasa. So Jagannatha Dasa actually was born as a Brahmana to his parents, who were also Madhvas and Brahmanas only. And the history of his childhood is not that well known. And there is a story that he had once actually insulted Sri Vijayadasaru during his childhood. So because of that, he was cursed to have ill health. And subsequently, he had to render service to the other disciple of Sri Vijayadasaru, that is Gopaladasaru, in order to be freed from that curse which he had. Till then, he had certain diseases and was having ill health. And he was actually a writer of the 18th century. So he lived during the 1700s, and he was initially a poet who authored works primarily in Sanskrita. So his books such as Harikatamrita Sara are very popular among Madhvas and provides a lot of detailed information on philosophy and also about the basic things. So uh, he was initially an author in Sanskrita, but later on he started writing works in Kannada, and the Harikatamrita Sara also similarly is a work in Kannada only. So more than singing in a poetic style, his works are more like prose compared to the other Haridasas. This is one difference which he has. So he also later had many other disciples, but very few are again well known among them. So one of them is Pranesha Vittala. So he was also one of the subsequent Haridasas, and later on, there were some other Haridasas such as Timmappa, for example, and he was also called Timmanadasa. So he was actually another disciple of Sri Vijayadasaru. And and again, like many of the Haridasas, his background is not that well known. and it is also disputed as to what was his exact timeline and when he lived. And this is actually the case for many of the Haridasas, because there are no proper precise historical records which are in accordance and which are in synchrony with other historical records of kings and other things, which other events which were happening at that time. So subsequently, there were fewer Haridasas, and another Haridasa was Sridhar Vittala, who lived during the 19th century. And another person was Venkatesha Dasa and Bhimesha Vittala. And later on, there were other Haridasas such as Sukhanidhi Vittala and Venkatadasa. And so subsequently, there were these many dasas who continued the tradition even till the 20th century. But later on, not many became well known after that, and even today there are people who have been contributing to that. And but nowadays there has been no one who has actually been able to match the poetic styles and the excellence of the earliest Haridasas, especially like Sri Narahari Tirtha, Sri Vyasa Tirtharu, and also Sri Kanakadasaru or Sri Purandaradasaru. So later on, there have been also women who contributed to this. For example, Sri Vittaladasaru's wife and sister, Sri Sundaramma, has also contributed, and his wife also contributed to the Haridasa tradition, and she was also a composer of many bhajans. And there has also been another popular member of this Kuta called Helavanakatte Giriyamma. So she was actually a bhakta of Ranganatha Swami, and she lived at a village called Helavanakatte. So because of that, she was named subsequently by that, and she also became popular as a poet and a composer of many bhajans in Kannada. Yes, any queries?
Brother, what's the name of his wife?
I don't remember exactly. We'll recheck and get back.
Okay, brother.
Any other queries? Yes, any queries? Sampath.
Hare Srinivasa.
Hare
Do
Srinivasa.
Haridasas have to take a vow to only compose in their mother tongue?
No, there's nothing like that. The Haridasas became famous especially for their works in Kannada, because that was the most common medium of preaching. And as I said, Sri Jagannatha Dasaru was actually initially one person who used to compose works in Samskrita than Kannada. So he
Ah,
was actually reputed for that, and at one point he had become slightly egoistic also. That he thought Kannada was an inferior language, and indicated that the people had no expertise in Samskrita, which is why the other Haridasas would compose works in Kannada. But later on, he dropped that after finally becoming a disciple of Sri Gopala Dasa. So after
hmm.
that, that is how he also started composing works in Kannada, and finally, uh, finally he ended up also composing works in Kannada, and his famous works are in Kannada only, such as Harikatamritasara.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd heard it somewhere, and yeah, it couldn't be true because even Sri Raghavendra Swami was also a Haridasa, right? Venugopala Dasa.
Yes, kind of in a way, but he wasn't a part of the Dasakuta as such, because he
Got
was
it.
more into being a sannyasi and writing detailed granthas in Samskrita and commentaries on the works of our Purvacharyas.
Yes, indeed. Uh, Hare Srinivasa, thank you.
Harish Nivasa. Also, there was actually a mistake which I made. So Sri Sundaramma was actually the wife of Sri Vittaladasa, and his sister was Ambabai. So they also encouraged other women also to become such poets and scholars. So similarly, the disciples of Tande Muddu Mohana Dasaru were usually, many of them were actually from the lower castes, and they were Shudras or Chandalas and so-called outcasts. So he converted all of them to the philosophy of Vaishnava Dharma, and had them receive Vaishnava Diksha and become Madhvas. So that is how much the Haridasas have especially contributed to the upliftment of all Hindus, and have ensured that the philosophy of Tattvavaada is preached properly even during the recent centuries, especially after the times of the earliest gurus like Sri Madhvacharya. So nonetheless, it's actually it's a pity that one won't find much of a mention about all these people, and they're not that famous, even though they've had immense contribution, and not many will popularize them. And even unfortunately, due to the effect of Kali Yuga, we have many Tamasika and Rajasika people in the garb of Vaishnavas today, and especially among the Madhvas themselves, who pretend to be great Madhvas but have deep hatred for the Vaishnavas who are non-Brahmanas, and especially non-Dvijas. And they even have hatred for Kanakadasaru and many of the other Haridasas who were Shudras and other Advija from Advija other Advija Varnas. So they have also contributed to avoiding popularizing these Haridasas and other people who have been Advijas or Avarnas, and for those who have become Madhvas despite being from other so-called lower Varnas. So any queries still here? So if there are no more queries, we can end the session here for tonight. Dhanyavada. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.
Someone had posted a question in the chat, Pratha.
I noticed it now. Thank you for telling me. I'm not sure about the number of compositions like this by Rayaru, because many works of Sri Raghavendra Swami are lost right now, unfortunately, and many are still they might not have been lost exactly, but they are currently being handled by careless people, and they're on the verge of being lost as of today. So the thing is, Sri Raghavendra Swami has written more than 100 books, and around some 60 of them or 70 of them were probably in Samskrita, and the rest were in Kannada. So most of his Kannada works are not available already, and only some of his major Samskrita works are available right now. But other than that, most of the Kannada works are lost as of today. And the fact is that he has composed few bhajans here and there in Kannada, but I am not sure of the exact number or the list. It might be available on the internet somewhere, but again, exactly how much he composed and whether all of them are available or not is uncertain, and especially because many of his works have become lost now. So Sri Vyasanakere Prabhanjanacharya, during recent times, he is another Madhva Vidwan and an engineer by profession. He had actually miraculously saved few granthas of Raghavendra Swami when he was staying at another person's house in a village. And that person was using a lot of papers as firewood, and he later suddenly discovered that the very next morning when he was staying there, that some of those papers were actually manuscripts of Sri Raghavendra Swami's works. So this is the condition of most of the granthas, which is happening since the last few centuries, and this is how many such amounts of knowledge are being lost now. But again, when it comes to Rayaru's works and the works of people like Sri Vijayendra Tirtharu and others, there have been hundreds of them. So there are hundreds of such granthas, and in the case of Rayaru, unfortunately, many are not preserved properly at all. So there is no guarantee as to how many were there, nor do we know much about them elaborately. Any more queries?
One question I had, Brata. My question is related to the Guru Parampara of the Madhvas. So I wanted to know how does the Guru Parampara goes on in Madhva? How the um, particular Pitadish or particular Guru is chosen in every mata?
That is dependent on the guru and whether that person is having the necessary qualifications. So in Vyasaraja Mata, for example, there is a rule that unless that guru knows the has fully memorized the works of Sri Vyasa Tirtharu, the major ones like Tatparya Chandrika and Sudha Mangala, so till then they cannot be chosen as the successor. And as usual, they have to have so many qualifications, like they have to have perfect sadachara, and they should have a good reputation, and they should fully exhibit the qualities of being a proper Vaishnava. This goes for almost all the other matas. And most importantly, to become the Pitadipati, they should also be physically fit, and they should also be able to handle the affairs of the mata, and they should also have immense knowledge of Tattvavaada. So this is a main rule which is there in all the matas, and for certain matas it varies. So sometimes there are unwritten rules, such as in many matas like Vyasaraja and Uttaradi, there is a preference for those who are grihasthas. So rather than balasanyasis, or those who, that is balasanyasis are those who directly go from the ashram of brahmacharya to sannyasa without becoming grihasthas or vanaprasthas. So at some of these matas, there is usually a preference for grihasthas. So because that is how most of the previous gurus have been, and ideally that is the correct way as per the shastras, though not many are following it nowadays. So does that make it clear?
Yeah, but I've heard that only sannyasis can give Guru Diksha, right? Or is that wrong?
That is, there is nothing like that. Diksha or the certain rituals like giving Diksha or Mantropadesha can be done by those who are chosen by their guru to do it. And for giving Diksha, there is a rule that only Brahmanas can do it. And in the Agamas, that is clear. And all these rituals are actually agamic, so they are not Vaidika exactly. So since they are not Vaidika but they are Tantrika, the rituals can be done by a proper guru who is a Vaishnava and a Pancharatrika. So since our parampara is Pancharatrika, we are followers of the darshan of Pancharatra. So the rules of the Pancharatra texts are applicable to us. And as long as giving Diksha is there, the person who gives Diksha should be himself a Bhagavad Bhakta. That is the main difference between a Bhakta and a Bhagavad Bhakta. Is a Bhakta is one who properly has bhakti and who exhibits the symptoms of a Bhakta but is not a Dikshita. And a Bhagavad Bhakta is one who has received Diksha. And among the Bhagavad Bhaktas, those who are Brahmanas and who are Shastra Kovida, they should be experts in the Shastras, and they should also be Acharyas. They should already be in the position of an acharya or a vidwan, and they should be learned. So they can give diksha to others if once they are considered as fit to give diksha to others by their respective guru. So in our sampradaya, we have very less acharyas who are diksha gurus and who are grihasthas. Especially most of the well reputed ones are sannyasis only. So that is why most of the time it is them who do that. And also one would prefer receiving diksha from a sannyasi, because they are usually the ones who are at a mata anyway, and that is the place usually where the rituals of diksha are performed. So again, there are many qualifications for that. And but again, usually the most of the gurus who provide diksha usually nowadays are the sannyasis only. But there is no such rule that only sannyasis are eligible to do it, as long as that person is a vidwan, an acharya, and a properly dikshita Vaishnava who has undergone shastra adhyayana properly, and who follows sadachara and has all the necessary qualifications, and should be a brahmana. So even those of them who are panditas but who are kshatriyas, vaishyas, or shudras are ineligible for this, because each varna has their own restrictions for what rituals they can perform and what they cannot perform. So similarly, if one sees the smritis, there is similarly a prohibition for brahmanas to undergo the ritual of coronation as a king or a ruler. So they are ineligible for that actually. So this is how the rules are. But again, so there is no rule that the person should be a sannyasi necessarily. Actually, as per the Shastras, the sannyasis should be renounced from most of this, and they are not actually supposed to live in a mata. Preferably, they should avoid it. Though living in a mata is acceptable, but again, they should avoid living in a city. The mata should also preferably be at the outskirts of the city or a small village towards a river bank. In such a location, the mata should be built, and they should also strictly avoid mingling too much with the people of the city or the village, and they should live a secluded life. But again, very few, a tiny portion of sannyasis actually follow this now, and most of them, for many of them, it has become inevitable also for preaching purposes and other things. But again, ideally, this is how it should be. So even in the Apastamba Dharma Sutra, actually, there is one mention, even when one receives initiation into the Vedic study, that is through Upanayana, the guru who performs Upanayana should also himself be learned in the Veda. So if he is not Vedavit, that is learned in the Vedas, such a guru is said to be the very origin of tamas. And even the Shishya who undergoes Upanayana is also said to be entering into tamas only. So actually, even that person's father also should be, or whoever performs the Gayatri Upadesha for that person should also be learned in the Veda. So nowadays, this is again not the case, and most of the people, neither do many even follow the basic dharmas of Dvijatva properly, nor are they nor are the people who perform the rituals also competent enough to do it. But anyway, that's a different story. But the same rule is applicable here also. So hope that makes it clear.
And Brata, is it necessary for the guru to be a completely realized soul?
Definitely. That again, as we said, that a person should be a jnani, that person should properly be a jnani now, and again, ideally, that person should be an aparoksha jnani. But again, since the people who have achieved that stage of enlightenment are rare, again, so those who are almost close to that, or on the or who have achieved a similar status or in the process of that, can also do it. And but as long as they're proper jnanis and they follow sadachara, and they have been they are fit to be considered as acharyas, and they should be considered as deshikas, or or that is, they should be given the position of deshika, not just acharya or vidwan, and that too by their guru, who should consider them as fit to provide diksha to others. Now there is actually one ritual in the Parama Samhita, which is a Pancharatra Agama, which actually has an elaborate explanation for a ritual after which that person becomes eligible to give diksha to others. There, that person's guru has to assess him, and after considering that person fully fit to become a diksha guru, at that time, this ritual has to be performed. Does that make it clear?
Yes, and when we say we take Diksha from Guru, is it the Guru who takes us to Vishnu, or is it the knowledge that is coming from the parampara that takes us to Vishnu?
It is the guru also. Multiple factors are there. Without the guru's anugraha, it is and without the anugraha from another aparoksha jnana, it is not possible to achieve aparoksha jnana. So that is why it is very difficult to achieve that, especially in this age currently.
So only an Aprakshagani can make an Aprakshagani.
Yes, in a way,
Yes.
yes. But again,
But
in the current times also, again, through knowledge from the purvacharyas also, subsequently, and by properly following the protocols of the shastras, one can achieve aparoksha jnana. But now again, the usually, if the guru's anugraha is the guru's anugraha should be there while giving diksha, and that guru should bless the disciple properly, and he should be competent enough to bless the disciple also. Only then that disciple can also subsequently prosper properly after receiving diksha, and also to progress spiritually.
yes, so with the Vani of the Aprakshagani also one can reach that stage, right?
No, for obtaining
One has to be.
aparoksha jnana, one has to have, as said in the Vishnu Purana translation, which we published on our website in the sixth Amsha, in the fifth and sixth adhyayas, it is, and also the seventh adhyaya, it is explained that there are two types of jnana, and the main method of obtaining yoga, that is union with Paramatma, is through bhakti. That is, and that is twofold. That is jnana yoga and karma yoga, where one has to be in constant knowledge of Bhagwan. So for that, we need agamota jnana, that is the apara jnana, the apara vidya, that is which is not the highest knowledge, but again it takes us there. So from that we get to know about Paramatma and about philosophy, and how to practice bhakti, and through that slowly, from contemplating upon that knowledge and also through proper instructions from a guru, we can subsequently attain the paravidya. So without this jnana, it's not possible for one to attain aparoksha jnana. Aparoksha jnana is there in the Shastras, and to practice that knowledge and reach the stage of enlightenment where one has paripakva bhakti, one has to have all this knowledge. So that is why we Madhvas especially stress on the fact that whether one is a Dvija or Advija or whatever, if they're Vaishnavas, they should study the Vijnana and they should obtain it. So Vijnanam Sachudраirapi Apyavedikam. So this is said by Sri Madhvacharya in the Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya itself, I think in the 28th Adhyaya, where even the Satshudras should properly study and obtain the Vijnana. So this is why we stress upon that more than any other sampradaya, that if not the Vedas, everyone else should study the other Shastras and should obtain the same Aparoksha Jnana from them. So hope that makes it clear.
So what if one accepts Madhvacharya as a guru and reads his books and follows and practices his teachings? Would that be enough to make him a Parokshani?
Yes, definitely it will be. I mean, in the sense, but that person has to do it perfectly. And again, the jnana which one can get directly from the currently written works of Sri Madhvacharya, which we have, is insufficient. So again, to understand them properly, one has to have a guru, and one has to obtain the knowledge properly, and one has to also read the other shastras like the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas. So their knowledge is also very much necessary. What Sri Madhvacharya has given is a summary, but again, one has to be in constant practice of bhakti and should also keep on improving their knowledge, and through that only the paravidya will come. Does that clarify?
Yes, thank you, brother.
Brata, how do they give diksha to a woman? And what are the criteria for a woman to get diksha?
It's the same for people of all varnas. Diksha is a tantric ritual, so there's no difference here for brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, except that the ritual of diksha is called pancha samskara. So during the ritual of pancha samskara, there are 5 samskaras or rituals which are the major ones which are done. So one is pundra, that is applying the urdhva pundra tilaka on the body. Then the next one is tapta, that is the imprinting of the heated seals of the shanka and chakra on the left and right shoulder respectively. So that is tapta mudra. The third is nama, that is giving that person a new name based on Sri Vishnu's names or Lakshmi Devi's names. And the next one is mantra, that is giving upadesha of the mantras which have to be chanted by that person as a practice of their regular sadhana. So for the Advijas, it is usually Sri Krishnaya Namaha and Sri Narayanaya Namaha. So if that person wants to receive upadesha of the nama of, that is the name of another name of Bhagwan, they can request for that as well. So that will also additionally be done. And also for the Dvijas, though, it is usually the Veda mantras such as the Ashtakshari and the Dwadashakshari, that is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and other few mantras such as Panchakshari, that is Om Namah Shivaya, and so many others will be given during Diksha. And finally, it is Yaga, that is using the Agamika rituals to worship Vishnu. So conducting basic rituals, that is these are the 5 samskaras which are done during Pancha Samskara. So this will convert one from Bhakta to Bhagavad Bhakta. So for women, usually they in most of the matas nowadays they prefer to do it after they're married, because marriage is similar to the samskara of Upanayana for the common women who are Advijas. So once that is done, it is usually preferred to provide diksha for women. Otherwise, usually unmarried girls are not given that usually. There sometimes some of them may be given mantropadesha, but not the proper pancha samskara.
Brother, will it pain having that tapta mudra?
This is the most common question which we keep getting. So uh, that depends on the person's skin and the thickness of the skin. Speaking especially from a medical point of view, but again, when it comes to Tapta Mudra, if the seals cool down for at least 1 or 2 minutes, it won't hurt that much. More than pain, there will be slight skin irritation, especially if it's the very first time one receives Tapta Mudra. And later on, subsequently, after a few months or after another year, they receive it, the skin will be used to that, so it won't hurt much. But again, there might be slight sensitivity over that area for 1 day at the most, if that seal is freshly heated and pressed.
If
So
they're sensitive,
that depends. That's why in such cases they can wait till the seal cools down a bit. So at that time it won't hurt much, nor will that person feel much of a sensation of that also. But again, if it's too cool also, the imprint won't come very well. But again, if it's cold enough to the extent that it's not that hot, then again it will imprint the symbols properly, and it will also not hurt that much. That's
they
why those who are at matas usually, those who are smart enough about this will wait at the end of the queue, so that many people will receive tapta mudra with those seals, and then once when by the time their turn comes, the heat would have been absorbed by those many people. But again, some people believe that it is lucky to receive it at the first shot once it comes out right from the fire at the yajna kunda. But again, receiving that is a good thing, and this is for madhvas it is to be done every year, so it is almost as important as panchasamskara itself. So almost every year during one of the ekadashis it is always done. And actually it is sometimes ideally it is supposed to be done on every ekadashi, but since the imprint will be there on the skin, it is usually avoided. So it is done only once a year or once every few months, depending upon when that person needs it. But again, at most of the matas they don't do it regularly.
they will give it on shoulders.
They give it on the shoulders only. That is where they do it. For sannyasis at some matas, they give it on 5 places of the body, on the chest and abdomen also.
Okay, brother.
Any more questions?
Yeah, one question. I wanted to know what is the rules one has to follow if one has to take diksha from a Madhva Mata.
So the basic rules are, as we said, the 6 yamas and 6 niyamas are a must for any Vaishnava. So along with that, there are other rules of sadachara which have to be followed. So they are mostly found scattered across in the smritis. And yeah, mainly for yama, that is ahimsa, one has to have a sattvika diet. And as we have explained in our Vaishnava handbook also and other publications, that certain foods like meat, alcohol, and brinjal, radish, drumstick, and mushrooms, these have to be strictly avoided at all costs. So, and along with that, preferably onion and garlic also, though that is not, though strictly speaking, they are also very tamasika and will cause loss of one's dvijatva and vaishnavatva. But if it's inevitable, it's not that much of a problem. But these 5 have to be avoided, the first 5 which we have mentioned. So along with that, the other rules such as properly having sadachara and practicing the other yamas and niyamas, and also following all the most of the rules of the shastras, at least the basic ones thoroughly, that is a must for everyone. So regardless of varna or whatever they are following, or whatever dharmas they have, these are a must. So, and most importantly, they should have firm faith in the philosophy of Tattvavaada, Sri Vishnu, and that Sri Vishnu himself is Paramatma, and all the tenets of Tattvavaada and Sri Madhvacharya's works. So, without that, obviously, there is no meaning to receiving Diksha. So, those who are ready to follow all this can receive Diksha. Does
And
that make it clear?
is there any criteria that we have to read any number of books or something like that?
Nothing like that. Though knowledge of Tattvavaada is preferable, especially if one is receiving Diksha, then that is a must actually, because that is a huge thing, and that cannot be done immediately. Also, this decision will need time, whether the person wants to take Diksha or not. Even if they want also, they should give time, and ideally the guru should also test that person. But nowadays, due to very few number of people, especially non-Brahmins who are interested in this, the most of the gurus are ready to give Diksha immediately, especially the former Pitadipati of Sri Pejavara Mata, that is Sri Vishwesha Tirtharu, and even the current Pitadipati, that is Sri Vishwa Prasanna Tirtharu, have been doing it, especially to most of the Dalits and those who have been converted to other religions, and by converting them back to Vaishnavism. But actually, it is preferable if one has very good knowledge of Tattvavaada and also other philosophies before accepting this as the final one. So, because the main objective of Diksha is that they're fully ready to dedicate themselves to following Tattvavaada or whatever Sampradaya they're receiving Diksha from. Does that make it clear?
Yes, and is there any number of mantra japa one has to do after initiation?
Preferably 108 times. That is we've given the numbers in our Vaishnava handbook also. So, usually for most mantras, it is 108 times. So, when it comes to most of the other mantras, but some mantras sometimes they can be chanted sometimes once, 3 times, or even 12, 24, so, or 10 times, 32. There are many such numbers, and sometimes even 1000 or 1008. So that varies depending upon the mantra, but those mantras, such as especially the ones which are tantrika and harinama, that is which the ones which are given to the advijas, or ones which are from the non-Vedic texts and can be chanted by anyone, they do not have much of a restriction, and but preferably they should be chanted 108 times. And along with that, preferably one should try their best to chant all the Panchastutis every day. But again, that may not be possible now. So at least the Vishnu Stuti and Narasimha Stuti, and along with that, Harivayu Stuti and others, they can try slowly. Does that make it clear?
Yes, thank you, Vada.
Brother means one mala we need to chant daily after Diksha.
Yes, preferably that much at least.
And someone wrote in the chat that for women they give Tapta Mudra on hands.
Yes, usually on the arms they give it. As it's usually not possible to give it on the shoulder, they give it near the forearm, just above the elbow. They usually do that. The location is pretty much the same only, because the rule is that Tapta Mudra should be done on the shoulders.
Okay, brother.
Any more queries? Okay, so if there are no more queries, we'll end here for tonight, and we'll have the next session next week where we'll discuss more about Sri Vadiraja Tirtharu and a few other gurus, and we'll also later discuss the last few topics which are remaining for the course in the sessions after that. So, Shubharatri, Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Om Achyutaya Namaha, Om Anantaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha, Om Achyutananta Govindebhyo Namo Namaha. Dhanyavada.
Hare Rama.
Vada.
Hare Rama.
Hare Ram.